Back in 2005, I was working for a radio station in Bloomington, Normal, Illinois called WIHN, known as 96.7 iRock. I was on the air 6 to midnight, 5 days a week, and on Saturdays sometimes as well. It was a great gig, and one day I received a phone call from one of the guys working at the radio station I worked at previous to that, which was WWCT Rock 106 Radio, which had changed hands and might have had another name like Real Rock Radio. But I do remember Rick Hirshman was the disc jockey that worked at Rock 106 Radio that called me one day and said, "Hey, Derek, I know that you're a big fan of Alice Cooper," which I'm a lifelong fan. He said he's going to be coming in town to come up to the radio station to do cut some promos for the different radio shows we have, because at the time Alice Cooper's radio show was being carried on one of the our sister stations, one of their radio shows. So Alice was making an appearance just to come up there to lay down some voice tracks saying, "Hey, this is Alice Cooper. You're listening to Real Rock Radio," and that kind of thing. Well, he called me to tell me that I was invited to come and meet Alice. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, really? He's going to be there in person? He said, "Yeah, and don't tell anyone. No one knows. There's no publicity around this. He's simply coming to the station for a while, and you're invited." Man, was I happy. So, of course, when the day came that Alice Cooper was going to be in town, I got to the station about an hour early, and word had gotten out, and there was about 10 or maybe 15 at the most people waiting in the parking lot to meet Alice when he pulled up. And that was cool, because I had my wife and one of my daughters there, of course, and wow, he was too cordial and kind. He signed autographs and took pictures with everybody, and then only those involved in the radio station could go upstairs, and I was one of the lucky few. Well, we went upstairs, and Alice ended up hanging out for at least an hour. It was awesome. The first thing he did when I was introduced to him was look at me up and down and say, "Wow, you look like you should be in a band with me." And I was like, "Yeah, too bad we're both vocalists." But then he was so cool, man. I literally at the time was too stupid to bring vinyl or records to get autographed. So I brought a big stack of paper photos, different colored and different black and white photos. And I must have laid out at least 10 of them. And all the guys at the radio station were looking at me like, "Damn, he's pushing the envelope." But you know what Alice said? "I'm all too happy to sign for a lifelong fan. Not a problem." And he was super cool, and I didn't feel bad about, giving them stuff to sign. After all, I'd been buying his records ever since the early 70s, and I think I've, paid my way into, getting some autographs, I guess. I ended up giving those away as gifts to people, and I kept a couple which are long gone because of the stupid 2020 Alameda fires. Well, when we were hanging out with Alice, he was so awesome. He went through and signed every single picture, and then he came across one that I had gotten out of an old 1972 issue of Rolling Stone magazine where the word heavy metal is mentioned. And Alice said to me, "I'm the first guy that ever mentioned the words heavy metal in rock and roll." And sure enough, in that article, he had mentioned the heavy metal in some context. Now, there's some debate about whether there was heavy metal, the word was mentioned before that, because if you go back in time, or maybe up in time, Deep Purple is often credited as being one of the first metal bands, although I consider them hard rock, and I love Deep Purple, man. But regardless of who claims the throne to the first person to say heavy metal, Alice told me that he, in fact, was, so I took him at face value. When that was all done, we signed autographs, we talked. Then he went in and actually cut a voice ID for my Church of Rock radio show. "This is Alice Cooper. You're listening to Derek Moody and the Church of Rock radio show." I never did get a copy of that. Somehow, some way, that was never given to me, and to this day, I bum out about that. It's like, where's my radio ID? Alice, if you're seeing this, email me. Fat chance. But anyway, Alice Cooper's a living legend, and something else really freaking cool happened that day. When I said, "Can I get a photo with you, Alice?" he said, "Absolutely." Well, when we went to take the photo, he literally took his hand, grabbed my throat, and he said, "I'll rip out your throat." And they took a picture of him ripping out my throat. It was awesome. And then he took another picture with his arm around me, proudly displaying a fan that was the real deal. And I still cherish those photos. I no longer have physical copies, but if you Google Alice Cooper with Bloody Mess, you'll see it. It comes up. And it's also on my Facebook page. I actually posted it a few minutes ago. Anyway, that was my story meeting Alice Cooper, and that was an amazing day for me, my friends. A big, big, big crossed off my bucket list type incident and experience. I loved it. Alice Cooper is truly one of the best rockers of all time, and definitely a workaholic, and definitely a man of charity. I know so many people that he's helped out, especially in his home state of Arizona. He does a whole lot there with youth and all kinds of programs, and they have been very, very kind to the people in their community. And Alice Cooper rocks, man. I've got more Alice Cooper stories to put on the channel later, but that wraps up this one for now. Could you do me a favor? If you liked this, could you subscribe to the channel for me, please? And maybe give it a like, leave a comment, and perhaps share. I've got some more rock tales coming at you tomorrow. Yeah, I'm going to do a request. Somebody has requested a story about Slayer. And I already have one story about Slayer on this channel, but I've got one more that I'm going to do tomorrow by request to you-know-who. All right, man, keep it real, rockers, and don't let nobody grind you down. Adios, over and out. Reverend Moody, a.k.a. Bloody F Mess, out of here.